Sharon McMahon, welcome to Wharton.
Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone. Thanks for waiting outside in the cold. It's so chilly outside.
Thanks for bringing us Minneapolis.
Yeah, it's so not warm here.
So excited to have you here. You are one of my favorite teachers, even though I feel a little deprived having never taken your class. Or, to my knowledge, any government or civics class, which...
You never took government?
I don't remember taking one.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you're pretty well informed for a person who never took a government class. So, you figured some things out.
I feel like there are some big gaps in my knowledge, which you're gonna fill today.
Okay.
But before we get to that, I want to talk about you and your background. So how did you get to become Queen of the Governors? Wait, how many governors are here with us tonight? Wow, a lot of you. Okay. And are all of you women? Okay, that's what I thought. Apparently men don't care about government.
Men don't care about government, clearly. That's obvious. Just look around. I mean, the short answer is I started doing this kind of work shortly before the 2020 election, when the world seemed to be going to hell in a handbasket. It was the height of a global pandemic. The election was very contentious. Lots of people had questions about what was going to happen if, and I just, I had very unique personal circumstances in which my husband had stage 5 kidney failure, and in August of 2020 got a kidney transplant. And that kidney transplant, of course, put him on immunosuppressive drugs for the rest of his life, and his health is good now. But that made the fact that we were very isolated even more pronounced, because at the time, in August, September of 2020, there were not vaccines or treatments for COVID, and people who had renal failure at that time had a 30% chance of death from COVID, and those are not odds anyone would take. If I was like, you have a 1 in 3 chance of dying in a car accident if you get in this car, no one would get in the car, right? Like, that's too big of a risk. So that was, what that did was give me time to start sharing some of the things that I knew that I never had time to do before. So that's the genesis of how this all started.
So glad you did.
Thank you. We wouldn't have met otherwise.
For sure,
That's right.
We wouldn't have met.
That's right.
But take us back a little further. How did you come to know all of these things?
When I was 12, I had a paper route. And that paper route required me to get up in the 4:30 a.m. freezing cold Minnesota winters and walk 3 miles in the dark and the cold with nothing else to do. There was no phone. There was not even an iPod, right? Even a Walkman. You guys remember Walkmans? Okay. Guess what doesn't work well in the cold? Batteries. So even if you had your little tape player where you're like, I made my mixtape from songs that I bootlegged from the radio, right? Did you all do that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Your bootleg radio mixtape, it would start to be like, a few minutes in. Sometimes I'd stick it in my coat and stick it under my armpit to try to keep the batteries warm. If you know, you know. So there was nothing to do. My point is, there's nothing to do on this 3-mile walk except read the newspaper.
You read the newspaper while you were walking.
That's right. I started reading the newspaper, and I would, sort of carefully fold it up before I would deliver it to make sure that nobody could tell that I had pre-read their newspaper. I got really good at refolding newspapers. Also a specialized skill that's difficult to do. So yes, the newspaper had to be folded in a certain way and then put inside the screen door. So it really started when I was 12 and started reading the newspaper. And then when I had a very illustrious babysitting career, I was one of those babysitters who actually like read books to the children and played with them and then cleaned up the house, right? Like the kind of mythical creature one can only hope to find. I saved up my babysitting money and bought, unbeknownst to my mom, a subscription to Newsweek magazine when I was 15 years old. And Newsweek was expensive because it comes every week, right? So it was not like a $12 a year Good Housekeeping situation. It was like $50 a year, which was a lot for a 15-year-old. So the long answer really is I started young and just like filed a lot of stuff away and then went to college and became a teacher. And you know this, the best way to really solidify information in your mind is to teach it to other people.
I have to ask, like, what did this do for your social life as a teenager? What I want to know is, did you have friends?
I had some friends. I wouldn't say I was a complete social outcast. I did have friends. But I was never the cool girl, right? It was never like, be sure to invite Sharon to the party. Never.
Until now.
Yeah, until now. I'm still probably not coming to your party. No, even in college, I was the person who, like, I had a boyfriend and we would spend our Saturday afternoon at the bookstore, and then we'd go home and read the books that we bought at the bookstore. Like, I was not the person who was like out at the bars and the parties.
Sounds like an ideal weekend.
It still is an ideal weekend, frankly.
Okay, so 2020, you start an Instagram account. Just out of the blue?
No, I actually owned a different business. And so I had a very small, sort of following from this other business that I owned. But like people who live near me, like a local business, was not anything sizable. And I started just posting little explainer videos on my Instagram. I started noticing that there were a few people on the internet who were confidently wrong, Adam. That problem, sadly, has not entirely dissipated. A few people who were confidently wrong. They were talking about things like how one can graduate from the Electoral College. How it's like a building you can go to, and none of these things are true. These are objectively false things, right? It's not a matter of opinion. So I realized in that moment that I could either spend my time arguing with random strangers on the internet, or I could actually produce some kind of content that might outlive a scroll. And so I just started making little explainer videos about how things worked. And local news channels, radio stations started calling me to come on the air and just explain what was about to happen as part of the upcoming election.
When did you know that this was a thing?
Probably December of 2020. When I remember very vividly, we were at my husband's 4-month post-transplant medical visit at the Mayo Clinic. And, it was December, it's dark, it's cold, it's dark at 3:30 p.m. And I had this sort of harebrained idea that wouldn't it be fun if I collected a whole bunch of Venmo donations, like 50 cents, and then I could give it away to, say, like a server at a restaurant and be like, here's $500, and like make their day. Like that seemed like a really fun weekend activity when we were just sort of trapped inside. And overnight, people sent me $14,000. And then by the time this was all said and done, people had sent me $125,000. And it was then incumbent upon me to like give away $125,000 responsibly, which is actually not very easy to do. But I realized that there were people who trusted me, and that trust was something that I needed to take seriously and continue to take seriously.
While we're on that, yeah. The money you've raised for charity is extraordinary. Tell us where you are now.
As of tonight, it's around $10.7 million.
I'm hoping that some portion of that has gone towards civics education for future me.
The Adam Grant Education Fund.
What have been the major causes that you've contributed to?
A lot of them are things like natural disaster relief, like World Central Kitchen, who they're out cooking hot meals for people who are in war zones or their homes have been destroyed by hurricanes. Convoy of Hope is a big one that we have worked with. They do a lot of disaster relief for, inside the United States for things like Hurricane Helene. Undue medical debt, which buys medical debt on the debt market and instead of collecting on it, forgives it. We've forgiven over $300 million of medical debt with being able to do that, that's huge. That's hundreds of thousands of people getting a letter in the mail being like, your debt has been paid.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that this is not even your job also.
Yeah, no, it's not my job. No, I don't get paid as a professional fundraiser. Like none of these organizations hire me to raise money for them. Doing development work for nonprofits. Is there anyone who works in nonprofit development? Yeah, you know how much work it is, you know how hard it is. And nonprofit development officers do incredible, important work. But no, I don't. Fundraising is not really, I didn't even have that on my radar. Like someday you're gonna raise $10 million.
So what are you? Who are you? How would you identify yourself?
This is a great question. I have actually mulled over what is my elevator pitch for somebody who doesn't know me.
#1 New York Times bestselling author. Thought leader, public intellectual, corrector of stupid people on the internet.
Everyone's favorite person. Oh, she's a corrector. Oh, I want to be her friend. Speed dial.
Professional debunker.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, now when I have to send in my bio to something, I've sort of reduced it down to like 4 lines, which is, author, host, founder, creator, like of these different things that I do.
None of which means anything
But
to
that
anyone.
means nothing to anyone.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm like the founder of the preamble, what does that mean? If you don't know what that is. So I don't know. I would love to hear your feedback.
I have feedback.
I would love it.
I have
Please give it to
notes
me.
on
Please
how
give
you
it to
present
me.
yourself.
Okay, please do.
I would like to see Sharon McMahon, candidate for president.
Oh, no. You've said that too many times.
Okay, fine. I'll take candidate for governor, or candidate for Congress. Just candidate for something.
How about you be candidate? Candidate?
One of us is qualified. Stop turning this around on me.
We've seen what it takes to be qualified.
Yeah, but we want to fix that, and like one of us hasn't even taken the course. You've taught it.
I have a lot of ideas about ways that government could be improved. I don't know if holding elected office is the most effective way to advocate for those changes.
Well, that's part of the problem then, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that the incentive structure from inside elected office is such that there's nothing to be gained for advocating for reforms from the inside. There's nothing to be gained. The incentive structure is loyalty to your party, which I think is part of what is broken with the system. But the loyalty to your party, no matter what they say, no matter who they nominate, no matter what they do, that's actually, I think, a dangerous idea. That's never led a single country someplace worth going.
Well, you're going to fix it for us tonight, aren't you? I think the main part of the agenda for tonight is to talk about if you were running our government or part of it, what you would do differently, assuming your incentives were aligned properly. So where would you begin? Like you get to reinvent democracy in America. What's your first move?
Well, that's a good question. Okay, so I have a handful of things that I think kind of work in conjunction with each other. Then they would work best if they were all implemented at a similar time, which has to do with how elections are structured and run in the United States. And if we could enact these sort of electoral reforms, I think a lot of the other reforms could more easily click into place. So these are things like having one national presidential primary day. Like this is actually a very easy change to make. This is not even a revolutionary change. There's no reason why people who live in Connecticut should not have any say over who the presidential nominees are if you have a late primary, and why a couple of states should have all the say, right? Why shouldn't everyone have an equal amount of say over who the candidates are?
Why is this not happening? Like, is Iowa blocking it?
I mean, the reason we don't have it is because Congress hasn't made a law that makes one national primary election day. We have 50 state elections run by their state governments, and they have some kind of, like the different parties have roles depending on what the state allows them to have. There's a lot of jockeying for power. Iowa and New Hampshire really like to be first, and they continue to move theirs up and up and up so that they're starting in February. This is another thing that goes along with my electoral reforms, is that we don't need 18 months. We do not need 18 months. There's nothing good that can happen within 18 months that is beneficial to the electorate, right? Like all it does is exhaust us, and it makes you want to check out because you're like, I can't watch this for one more day. It's too much. So
also, can I just jump in on that and ask you, like, in what other job that's the most complex and difficult job on earth, do you spend half of your time trying to get reelected to it as opposed to doing the job? Like, this seems crazy to let incumbents campaign.
That incumbents then basically, especially if you're running for, say, a Senate term, the last 1/3 of your term is spent running for reelection. Coupled with all of these things, the way that we fund campaigns in this country is deeply problematic. It is deeply corrupt. There aren't any, I don't even know a single American other than the beneficiaries of this system who feel like the way money works in politics is on the up and up. That this is fair for Americans, that this is in all of our best interest, that a handful of billionaires should be able to move the chess pieces on the board without any input from the rest of us. This is not a problem other countries have. And so what that means is that this is a very solvable problem, right? It's a very solvable problem. We just have to muster the will to solve it. There's no reason it needs to take 18 months. If it doesn't take 18 months, it doesn't cost $1 billion per person. That's not an exaggeration. Kamala Harris spent $1 billion in 90 days. Both Biden and Trump spent $1 billion each in 2020. These are not hyperbolic figures. This is like the actual amount of money. That's absurd and asinine. There's no reason that it needs to cost that much money. Other democracies have figured out solutions for this. So we need to compress the electoral time period. We need to remove how in the funding sources for campaigns. I would argue that we should have some kind of public funding of campaigns, and that means that the public would then be able to have oversight over how that money is spent. Each person is going to get 15 TV commercials on the public airwaves, or whatever the consensus is among the people who make these decisions.
Can I vote for 0?
0 commercials.
Who wants to see a political ad?
Nobody's favorite. Nobody's favorite. Somehow candidates need to communicate with Americans. So, but again, the method in which candidates communicate with Americans, that's something we should be able to discuss and debate and figure out what is the best way. Is it a debate? Is it everybody gets commercials? Is it everybody gets a chance to mail something directly to somebody's house? I don't know the answer to that question, but I think that's worth exploring, right? There's probably more than one potential answer for that. But if you live in a swing state, perhaps you opened your mailbox each day to a stack of mail 1 inch thick. And everybody's like, ugh. And that all just goes where? Immediately into the trash, right? Immediately into the trash. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of emotional resources. It doesn't have to be that way.
These reforms all make logical sense. You know plenty of people in Congress. I imagine you've pitched some of these ideas. How do they react?
They all agree. There's no.
And why aren't they doing
I
it?
have not spoken to one person in Congress who's like, yeah, the incentive structure is really great and I approve of it. No, they all agree that the incentive structure is very broken. Whether they'd go on TV and say they won't because of the incentive structure, right? To defy one's party generally means to be ostracized from one's party, and a person alone is relatively ineffective in government.
Well, this is like a prisoner's dilemma problem then, because you
Right.
need everyone to agree to cooperate on this stance, but if people start to defect, then the whole thing falls
The
apart.
whole thing falls apart.
So what are you going to do about it?
Well, I do think, again, that that my resources are best used from the outside. I do think power is a corrupting force. I think, of course, money is a corrupting force. So in the sense of like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, he's like, don't tempt me with the ring, right? Like, don't offer it to me because this ring will corrupt me. So I don't think that I am best suited for the halls of power, not because I feel like, oh, I'd immediately become corrupt, but because that is often the default position, that you just care more about your job security and staying in power, consolidating your own power, than about actually making meaningful change. So in terms of what I plan to do about it, that's a great question, and I'm working on it. Whether that comes from forming some kind of civic organization that works to advocate for these kinds of changes, starting in state legislatures and expanding to national government. I don't know the right answer. What do you think?
I mean, I think that sounds great to me. I would also advocate for a second #1 New York Times bestselling book about, I would call it Governors.
That's right. You told me that. You're like, your next book needs to be called Governors. But what is that? What would that book even have in it? Pictures of whales?
3 of you want that.
Yeah.
For the rest of us, I think it's a book about how to reinvent democracy and sort of laying out the facts for how healthy democracies function and proposing a bunch of reforms that you could build a movement around. Maybe. Are you in?
It's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea. Is it a page turner though, Adam?
I trust your voice to make it one.
I'll put in some Friends references.
I don't know that it has to be a page turner, right? It could be a manual.
Yeah. I know the book that I was originally thinking of writing before I wrote The Small and the Mighty was the general concept was government for grown-ups. And I had thought, well, I will illustrate it with my very excellent illustrations, which everyone knows I'm very talented in the drawing department. A couple of years ago during the pandemic, my mom signed me and my sisters up for a drawing class at a prestigious art school. No podunk art school. Like, this is like the artists that come out of this school are like incredible. And their perspective is everyone can learn to draw, that you don't have to have talent, everyone can learn to draw. And I was like, we'll see about that. And so every week we went to this art class, and they have you, it's in this dark room, we have special lighting on your easel, and they give you something to draw, and they talk to you about how to draw it. And eventually the instructor was like, you are not good. But see, wouldn't that make the book more interesting? right? If the illustrations are good, then what is it? It's an Audubon manual of like, look at these beautiful bird drawings. I'm not good at that.
You're reminding me of when my wife signed us up for dancing lessons before our wedding, and then I was so bad that she took pity on me and quit.
Was she envisioning you guys doing like the foxtrot?
I think she was just envisioning me not moving like a Muppet, which was a low bar but too high.
Did you guys just do the grip and sway then? You didn't even do that?
I don't think I was allowed to dance.
You were not allowed to dance at all?
I blocked it out.
Okay.
But back to you. I think so. I want to talk about more of your ideas for improving government, but I also want to talk about the small and the mighty. Tell me why you decided to write this book.
In many ways, this book is a love letter to the reader. It's a love letter to many of the people in this room who have read the book.
How many people have read the book? Wow.
That's amazing.
Impressive. Normally, just so you know, you normally come to a book event having not read it so that the content is new. But you all are way too prepared for that.
It was just yesterday named one of the top 5 books of the year by Amazon. Yes. Best books of the year. I got a note from my editor today with a picture of my book on a billboard in New York. So it's gratifying that people like to read it, of course. But I really did write every single word with the audience in mind, with the people, like the people in this room in mind. And my hope was that when you close the last page that you would have felt my love and care for you in all of the stories that I told. But I think that people who read this, people who are attracted to this, feel like no matter what they do, nothing changes. That it's too easy to feel hopeless. It's too easy to feel like my life is too small. I don't have daddy's money. I don't hold elected office. I don't have some famous name. My life is small and ordinary. And yet, it's not even that I long for greatness. It's not that I want my name on a marquee. It's not that I think I'm Beyonce waiting in the wings. It's that I want to feel like what I do matters. And isn't that such like a really core human desire, that you want to matter?
Sociologists call it mattering.
Yeah, yes, you want to matter.
Cleverly.
Yes. And so part of the reason I wrote these stories was just an illustration of how individual lives really do matter, and that you don't need to have your name on the side of a weirdly shaped rocket ship in order to matter. You don't need to have invented the cotton gin, like the printing press. You don't have to have done all kinds of nuclear physics to matter. And I know that is a message that so many people not just want, but need in this moment.
Well, I thought you delivered it beautifully. I mean, the book it's tremendously inspiring and empowering, and it's also funny, as expected.
Thank you.
Do you have a favorite character from it or story?
I do.
If you had to pick one?
Yeah, I do have. I mean, they're all my favorites. Just kind of like your kids are all your favorites. And you do love all your kids, but sometimes your personality is a better match for one of your children's personalities. And it doesn't mean you love them more. It just means that it's an easier, more simpatico kind of, just easier, right? So of course I relate most to the teachers in the book, right? Because that's what I did for most of my adult life.
You still do, last I checked.
Yes, just teach it in a different way. So I really love Septima Clark in this book. She's one of my favorite people. And one of the things that I always take away from her story is that her life was by no means one that you would want to trade places with. You would never look at the set of facts of her circumstances and think to yourself, I'd love to have her life. Like she gets married and has a baby and her baby dies. She has another baby, and then after having the second baby, she discovers that her husband has a secret second family and is married to somebody else, and then he dies, leaving her the worst thing somebody could be, which was a single mom. That was truly societally one of the worst things you could be. It's still one of the hardest things you can be, right? And throughout her life, she has many enemies who oppose her efforts when it comes to civil rights. She's involved in lawsuits to try to get equal pay for Black teachers. She gets fired from her job for refusing to renounce her membership in the NAACP. She has people try to kill her. They try to firebomb her house. She's in multiple accidents in which she almost dies. And eventually, once she is fired, she finds so much free time on her hands. And this reminds me a little bit of 2020, when we all had more free time than we were comfortable with. She has so much free time on her hands that she decides she's going to teach adults. And one of the adults that she ends up teaching is a woman named Rosa Parks. And so she becomes the mother of the civil rights movement without ever setting that as a goal. There was no vision board. There were no yearly New Year's resolutions. She just kept doing the next needed thing. And that is honestly what so many people in this book did. They just kept doing the next needed thing. And that's something that's honestly available to all of us, right? All of us today can keep doing the next needed thing. And that brings me comfort when I see the enormity of the world's problems, which are not difficult to find on the interwebs. They're not difficult to find on Al Gore's internet. Have you guys seen that Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt clip with Titus Andromedon, where he said, when Al Gore invented the internet, he invented a rhythm for it. The Al Gore rhythm. That's right. That sounds accurate. It's a fact. The point is that it's very easy to just, you get incoming alerts on your phone. Your small device that contains the entirety of human knowledge alerts you every time something bad happens. Is that how humans have evolved to be healthy mentally, Adam?
Not last time I checked.
You would know better than I would, but it doesn't seem like a recipe for human flourishing.
No.
To be alerted every time, so you can recoil in horror 20 times per day? Is that how humans are meant to thrive? So the point is that she continued to do the next needed thing, which is what each one of us can do. And we can also turn off the incoming alerts on our phones and choose when we would like to be alerted about the horrors of the world.
I could get on board with that. Mm-hmm. Is there anything you left on the cutting room floor that you want to share with us?
Oh my gosh, yes, there's so much that I left on the cutting room floor because of my, disagreements with Helen, my editor Helen. Bless her. Helen and I actually get along great. So I would say all of these same things if Helen was sitting in the front row. There were several stories that I had included that ultimately got cut. One of them has to do with somebody who was from Philadelphia, Anna Jeans. If you've read the book, you know who Anna Jeans is. In fact, her family was, there's a Jeans hospital here in Philadelphia. And she was a Quaker woman who did not believe in living a flashy life. In fact, she was a little judgy of people who wore black silk clothes instead of black cotton clothes. I know that's silk. Oh, you got your picture taken? You know, she was a little bit judgmental about it. But when she gets to be an older woman, she inherits a vast sum of money. Again, just family money. And she decides that time is short. I'm in my 70s. And I don't have very much time left to do all the good I can with the modern equivalent of hundreds of millions of dollars. And she changes the course of history in a way that is described in the book that you can read about. But one of the lines of inquiry that I spent 2 years working on is that I became convinced that Anna's family was involved in the Underground Railroad. And they lived in the right place at the right time. They knew the right people. Her brothers knew William Still, one of the primary historians of the Underground Railroad. They were friends with many prominent abolitionists, people who did work on the Underground Railroad. And they had a country estate called Stapley. And at one point they abandoned this country estate. And that was very curious to me. Why would you abandon your country home where you go in the summertime? It seemed like out of character. And one day, this country home is burglarized, and somebody steals a painting out of this country home, a painting that Anna Jeans had painted, and it was meaningful to her, and she wanted it back. And so during the ensuing investigation, it comes out in the reports that it looks as though people had abandoned the home in a hurry because there was still food on the table. And that to me set off all my little spidey senses of who is using this house? It seems out of characteristic that they would abandon it. We have a whole set of facts about why they would have been involved in the abolitionist movement. And it made a lot of sense to me that they would have been letting other people on the Underground Railroad use their country property. But because the Underground Railroad was, by definition, outside the law, nobody was writing down and then I took 4 escaped enslaved people to 123 Main Street. Nobody's doing that. And Anna herself refused to keep records of anything that she did. She believed in this notion of don't let your right hand know what your left is doing, and then your reward will come in the next life. So I had the bottom line is that it became, after years of working on this, years of working in the archives of Swarthmore and University of Pennsylvania and all of these archives that hold very, very small numbers of Anna's correspondence. She didn't keep any of her own correspondence. The only correspondence that exists is a letter that she wrote to somebody else, and then that person kept it. I came to the conclusion that there were not known paper records of this story. And so I detailed in the book how frustrating it was for me to try to prove something that I still believe is true, and why these kinds of stories never get told. There's never been a book written about Anna Jeans. Why we leave women's stories on the floor of history, because no one was writing them down. And ultimately, because I could not bring that to a satisfying conclusion of and then I found the records under the floorboards in the attic. They made me cut that. But maybe it's for the better. I don't know. But it's just an illustration of why so often we don't tell these stories.
I hope you'll keep looking.
Did you hear how that just came right out of my mouth? Oh yeah. I'm for sure gonna keep looking. Yeah.
Good. Okay, let's come back to the modern day then and talk a little bit more about fixing our thriving democracy here in America. What is your favorite reform from another country that you'd love to import?
That's a great question. Well, I think there's two that I can think of. One is a law in Jamaica that says that you are not allowed to speak badly of the opposing candidate. And on one hand, yeah, like, okay, free speech, blah, blah, blah. I get it. Sometimes you want to bring up something bad that somebody else has done. What if the other person is truly terrible? Shouldn't the voters know about it? But you're not allowed to personally insult the other candidate. And there actually is like a review board that if somebody hears, even in, say, a bar, they overhear you talking to your buddy. If they get a recording of it, they can send it in and you can be removed from the race. Removed
Wow.
from the race for violating campaign laws. So maybe that goes a little too far, but nevertheless, it's like it's a posture, right? It's not even so much of like, we must adopt these specific rules, but a posture of presenting your compelling vision for the future as opposed to spending all of your time talking about how terrible your opponent is. It's really difficult to follow a leader who has no vision for the future, whose only vision is telling you how terrible someone else is. And then,
Wow. Wait, so I just have to ask, what do you do when the candidates are so bad that an insult is the only thing you can say to them?
I know, right? Well, you don't have to talk to them. You can talk about your own vision, right? You don't have to talk to them necessarily. You can just say, these are my ideas. And feel free to contrast that with other people's ideas. But it's a fair question. Like, what if the other candidate is truly horrible? Are we just supposed to ignore it? My other idea, my other big reform that I would like to import from another country has to do with the way we structure Congress. Most other democracies do not use congressional system like we do. Congress is intractable, it's ineffective. Maybe you've noticed. It doesn't get that much done. They spend all their time having press conferences and ousting each other from power instead of actually working on behalf of the American public. I would like to sort of break the stranglehold that the political parties have on the lawmaking process. Most other countries have 4, 7, 9 healthy political parties that people can choose from. And then those parties must form coalitions around ideas that they want to advance so that everybody can get something that they want instead of nobody getting anything that they want. That's the system we have now. Nobody's getting anything that they want. Wouldn't it be better for us to work together to build a chip factory? Wouldn't it be better for us to work together to build safe bridges, things that we can agree on, as opposed to just doing nothing because we disagree on other issues?
The hard part is getting from here to there, right? And I think maybe the idea I'm most excited about right now to move us there is an alternative to ranked choice voting, which you know as approval voting. So for a long time, I've dreamed of, like, I don't even expect to vote for a good candidate anymore. I just want to veto the worst ones. And approval voting strikes me as the simplest way to do this, where you just check all the candidates you would tolerate. And then the winner is the one who's least intolerable.
By the most people.
Yes.
Checked by the most people.
And I read some research on this recently, which showed that one of the benefits of approval voting, aside from ruling out the candidates that are most hated, is that it changes third-party candidates from spoilers into real viable contenders. And that seemed like a compelling idea. What do you make of approval voting?
I am a fan of approval voting and ranked choice voting. In part, it allows more people the opportunity to have a candidate that they can at least be like okay with. You know, like I illustrate it with this idea of like, if I give you 3 choices about what to have for dinner, one is ice cream, which is the most delicious. One is broccoli, which is medium delicious. Tastes good, made right. You hate broccoli? Are you George Bush? Get out of here. I like broccoli, okay? Some people like it, right? It's edible to some of us, right? At least a percentage of us would eat broccoli if presented with it.
I'll go along with that.
Okay, and then the third option is sewer runoff. If those are the three options, we could be like, okay, I guess I would be fine with broccoli or ice cream, right? Like my first choice is ice cream, but if I can't have ice cream, I at least want an edible food. I don't want sewer runoff for instead. And so to speak exactly to what you're saying, too often, one of those three choices acts as a spoiler for the other ones, and you end up with the unintended consequences of electing sewer runoff for whatever office it is, right? And a lot of people are like, but if I had had a second choice, I would have picked broccoli. It's at least edible. So ranked choice voting is one way to go about that. Approval voting is a little bit more simple. You don't have to be like, one, I guess, is it two or three? I guess two. Like sometimes the idea of ranking things, it overwhelms people who have trouble with indecision. That seems like a bunch of you said, mm-hmm. Do you guys have trouble with indecision?
They're not sure what to say.
They're not sure what to say. I don't know, do I? Mm-hmm. I have a daughter that's like that, where it's like, do you want to have X or Y for dinner? I don't know, don't ask me. Like it's too difficult to choose, right? Have you been trapped in that? Like, what do you want for dinner? I don't know, what do you want for dinner? Approval voting is just like, which of these items would you tolerate for dinner? And which of these are sewer runoff? Don't pick those, right? That's a very simple thing to implement. A lot of these things are not easy, but they are simple. And that's the barrier, is that because they're simple but difficult, that makes people not have a lot of will to try to move that needle.
Now, I think the good news about these kinds of voting reforms is that individual states can adopt them, as I understand.
Yeah.
At what point do we get to a critical mass where enough states are doing them that the whole country gets on board?
Well, it would just continue to spread around the whole country because there is no national system of voting. All of the elections are run by the states. So it would continue to just be individual states. But the tide will turn when the states who are not using it realize that their voters aren't getting the full cadre of choices like all of these other voters are. You saw in the most recent election how some states had RFK Jr. on the ballot, some didn't have him on the ballot. If enough states started having 5 people on the ballot and a bunch of other states only had 2, those states that only had 2 would quickly want to get in line. So it becomes a critical mass when you probably have maybe 15 states. That's maybe my estimate of like, if 15 states were doing it, and especially if those states were larger, I think you'd see a lot of other states start to line up.
This seems like a great project for your new civics organization. Let's get the 15 on board.
15 states. Do you know about the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact?
No, but I want to now.
It is an agreement between states that has already been signed by a whole bunch of states that will only go into effect when enough states have signed it. And the idea behind it is all of the states who sign on to it agree our electoral votes will go to the winner of the national popular vote rather than who wins only in our state. The winner of the national popular vote will get our electoral votes. And what that does is it's designed to eliminate the disparity between somebody winning the Electoral College and not winning the popular vote, which has happened a number of times. It's sort of an end run around eliminating the Electoral College constitutionally, because that is a much bigger hurdle.
You taught me recently that we didn't always have an electoral college where all the votes go to the winning candidate.
No.
How do we get to that?
Yeah.
How do we undo that?
Yeah, states can still decide for themselves how they want to allocate their electoral votes. And 2 states have decided we're going to do something different. They're divided up by district and by the winner of the statewide contest in Nebraska and Maine. every state can just decide at the state legislature level, here's how we're going to allocate our votes. So for the first 30, 40 years of using the Electoral College, there was no winner take all, where whoever wins Pennsylvania is going to win the election. That is too much pressure for one state, okay? It's too much pressure for one state. It's also not fair to all the other states, right? That one state should have so much power, an outsized amount of power, despite not having the vast majority of people. You certainly have plenty of people, but it's not like Pennsylvania has half the country that lives here, right? So when you look back to, say, the election of 1796, there were 5 presidential candidates on the ballot, and the electoral votes were spread out amongst them. They had actual choices amongst 5 different people, and in fact, some people wrote in other candidates. There was like an other category in 1796. Over time, states began to realize that we could have more political power if we banded all of our electors together and we all agreed amongst ourselves. Whoever wins in our state's going to get, is going to get all of our electoral votes. And it was a way to sort of turn the head of the candidate, of like, you're going to want to pay attention to us, our needs, our wants. Virginia wants to continue to enslave people. We're a big state. We're going to give you all of our electoral votes if you do what we want. So it was a little bit like the dominoes beginning to fall, developed over the decades. More and more states decided at the state legislature level to allocate their electoral votes in a winner-take-all fashion. But it doesn't have to be that way. It's just because states have decided that. It's not in the Constitution. There's nothing that says that that needs to continue to be. We don't need to continue to maintain the status quo.
All right, I think it's time for a lightning round and also some pre-submitted audience questions.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I am.
Okay, first lightning question. Tell me what the worst advice is that you ever got.
Care about what everyone else thinks of you.
Best advice?
This is very lightning. It's very speedy. I have a speedy answer. Best advice, oh my gosh.
If you're having trouble with indecision, no one here can help you.
Nope. No. You know, I can't say that, here, I'll just give you an example of some good advice that I got. Some good advice that I received from somebody who is sitting near me on the stage was, stop pretending like you need to be deferential and play it small all the time. Of like, oh, it's no big deal that I did that. I got this on sale. Do you know how especially women have the tendency to, like, you want to repel any compliment that comes towards you? Because to accept it with an open hand is regarded as what? You're
modest.
Like, you're right. You think too highly of yourself. If you say, oh, thank you, instead of, oh yeah, oh my gosh, no, I gained 5 pounds last week. What are you talking about? You know, like if somebody compliments you on how you look or what you said or whatever, the idea that you should repel any and all compliments instead of just saying, oh, thank you. That's kind of you to say. That's a way of playing it safe and playing it small in an effort to make yourself, whatever, assuage your own feelings of feeling like, well, I don't want people to regard me as, whatever. That is often not how men play social interactions. Have you noticed?
Never.
Never.
Well, you have gotten quite good at accepting a compliment.
Thank you. Every time we used to talk, you would say something nice to me, and I'd be like, oh, blah, blah, blah. You'd be like, no. The correct answer is, thank you.
I don't have to do that anymore.
How well I did at that? Yes.
Thank you for that. Something you've changed your mind about lately?
Whether I should wear the color red. I used truthfully, this might seem silly to you, but I truthfully would never wear it because I felt like it drew too much attention to me. That I'm 6 feet tall, I have blonde hair, you already cannot miss me. There is no like, oh, Sharon, I never noticed. And so I always felt like if I'm wearing this color that I'm intentionally drawing too much attention to myself, as opposed to just being like, oh, I like that.
Give us an unpopular opinion that you will happily defend.
Meatballs are gross. Why do I want mushed up meat with breadcrumbs and eggs in it? That doesn't sound delicious to me.
You've clearly never had an Allison Grant meatball.
You have to invite me over sometime, but maybe you've never had Sharon McMahon broccoli.
You're on. I like where this is going. Okay, so let's get some. Oh no, I have to ask you one other lightning question. My all-time favorite description of you was in an article that lauded your golden retriever energy.
That was in the Atlantic.
What was your reaction to that?
You're not wrong.
Touche. All right, some of the audience questions, we've covered a few of them already. Some of them I thought were quite interesting. One is it possible to be both curious and judgmental?
Oh, absolutely. It absolutely is. It's possible to be curious about things you don't know and judgmental about the things that you have more knowledge on. I think so, yes.
I was waiting for you to say, oh, what an interesting and terrible question. I think maybe the same person asking, there are some movements that do non-judgmental listening and trying to understand people who radically disagree with you. This is hard over the internet. How do we have better conversations online?
Well, I think it starts with both people being willing, right? It's really difficult to have an open-hearted conversation with somebody who is hell-bent on your own destruction, or a troll, or a Russian bot. It's really hard to have a meaningful conversation with them. So I think it starts with just asking somebody, are you open to talking about this right now? Or however you want to phrase it. Getting that sort of buy-in from both parties lets you know up front, am I beating my head against the wall? Or am I literally talking to somebody who only wants to, end this conversation with the plug for their crypto scam?
Okay, that's a good segue to some post-election perspective. I think one of the most depressing things I've seen lately is people proclaiming that half of America is sexist and racist and homophobic. And leaving aside the question of whether there's truth to that or not, empirically it's counterproductive. I read some research going back to 2016 showing that after party affiliation, the single strongest predictor of voting for Donald Trump was believing your group does not get the respect it deserves. So if you want to reach those people, disrespecting them and trying to shame them is only going to backfire. I'm having a hard time getting that message through to people. You are a master at this. How do we get people to stop that?
I know, every time that I say things like along those lines too, I recently had a post that said something to the effect of, people don't change their mind or their behavior about fill in the blank because you shamed them into it. If shaming permanently modified behavior, nobody would be an addict, right? Nobody wants to be an addict, and they'd certainly feel bad about it. If shame worked, everyone would be eating 7 servings of broccoli every day.
You would anyway, but.
If all we had to do was feel bad about something enough, and then we would change our behavior, we would all be model citizens, following all the health guidelines, getting 8 hours of sleep and whatever. It starts in my mind with just modeling what that looks like, right? Like, how do you teach kids how to do something? It's not telling them to do it, it's showing them how to do it. Showing them what it looks like to fill in the blank. That's just like how the human mind works. It works best by watching what other people do. And this is one of the reasons why voting matters, who we elect matters, because people emulate the behavior of leaders.
So I have to ask this one. The question is, what would it take for someone like you to make a legitimate run for president? And wait, I'm gonna modify it and ask, if you had to choose to run for president, Congress, or governor of Minnesota, which one would you choose, and under what conditions would you do it?
Well, governor of Minnesota seems like the most plausible, right? Because I have met Tim Walz a number of times, and
he's ready to hand over the keys.
He's ready to hand it over to me. No, it's a place I grew up, it's a place I'm familiar with, it's a place I know the most people, it seems the most plausible. You can run into Tim Walz literally, and I have, at a gas station at 5:30 in the morning while he is wearing hip waders and a baseball cap and is like, how's it going? You know? So I feel like as governor of Minnesota, you could still have a reasonably normal life. One of my issues with being president is that you can never have a normal life again, not ever. Did you see that interview with Kamala Harris where they said, what's the hardest thing for you about running for president or being the vice president? She said she can no longer text her family because of the security of her phone, that texting is too dangerous. The idea, she's like, I miss texting my sister. The idea that you have to give up texting your sister, like that ask is too big for the overwhelming majority of people who would be good leaders.
Yeah, it reminds me of a mantra that you can sell your privacy, but you can never buy it back. Mm-hmm. There are a bunch of people wondering how we fight misinformation in the political sphere, which is one of those wicked problems that nobody knows how to solve. But do you have a favorite place to start or a couple of interventions you'd love to see us try?
One of the things that I always say is that the best inoculation against misinformation is the truth. You all know that the moon is made of rocks. And I could sit on this stage for an hour and a half telling you it's made of green cheese, and you would still leave here not believing that to be true, because you know the truth. So the best way to not fall prey to misinformation is to know what the truth is. Or to at least know where to find the truth about something, even if you can't personally read all the scientific studies or whatever. So that's the first thing I think about, is that better education really matters. And I'm not just talking about high schools, I'm talking about work like I do. Better education on the internet really matters. It is not just a convenient place to learn. I think it is the place that most people are. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is to remind ourselves about how one actually ascertains reliable information. And it's not from Facebook posts. It's not from Facebook posts. The other skill that people need to beef up is how to obtain legitimate information. And that goes hand in hand with media literacy.
Yes, please. Okay, last substantive question for you before we wrap. The question says, Sharon and Adam, what's your best advice to give to some of us naturally anxious people to combat feelings of doom and gloom and instead choose hope? If we find ourselves spiraling, if we're devastated by the election, is there a mantra or a perspective that you could coach us to do or think instead?
You go first.
Well, I took my best crack at this in a New York Times essay earlier this week, where I said, no matter what you think is coming in the next 4 years, you are definitely wrong. Guess what? You cannot predict the future. And that doesn't mean that all good things are coming. I'm sure there are lots of things to be worried about, but we're constantly overconfident about our ability to forecast future events, and we don't know anything about second-order consequences. And world politics and American politics is basically like doing meteorology. You can get a pretty good forecast for tomorrow. You might be somewhat accurate 10 days out. And then after that, as one of our star faculty, Phil Tutlock, put it, you're about as accurate as a dart-throwing chimp. And so I think every time you see doom and gloom, the best thing you can do is say the world is fundamentally uncertain. Sometimes terrible events have positive consequences. Sometimes terrible events are a wake-up call, or I might even say to the Democratic Party, a woke-up call to try to moderate and move toward the center. And maybe there are some long-term silver linings in that. And I think just knowing at the end of the day, when it comes to crystal balls, we are all chimps is a healthy reminder.
Maybe one could draw a picture of a chimp on a Post-it and then put it on their bathroom mirror. That would be a good idea. In terms of like one of the things that I try to remind myself of, like a mantra, is I refuse to be distracted from my important work. And that every single one of us in this room, it doesn't matter if you're retired, if you're 85 years old, if you're 19 years old, every single one of us has important work on this earth. And if we are spending all of our time engrossed in things that are beyond our control, catastrophizing an unseen, unpredictable future, imagining only the most horrific of outcomes, that kind of mindset is actually a tool of the status quo. That is how we stay stuck exactly where we are. And so I frequently remind myself, I refuse to be distracted from my important work. And for some days that means I refuse to argue in the DMs with the husband of an elected official from the state of Tennessee, who tried to call me the C word. Instead of arguing with him, I just reported him to all of the nonprofit boards that he sits on. Yes. Seems like a more effective use of my time. And then I also remind myself that if people can't distract me, they will try to make it so I don't enjoy it. And having joy in your important work is part of what makes your life worth living, right? Having joy in your important work. So that's the other mantra that I remind myself frequently of. I refuse to let them, whoever them is, suck the joy from my important work. Because you can't stop somebody who enjoys their important work in the world. Like that's a very, very difficult force to contend with, right? And so many of the historic figures that I admire, they had joy in their important work, not because of their great life circumstances, not because of all of their vast personal fortunes, not because all their children were alive on earth, not because of ease, not because people didn't oppose them, but they had joy in their important work because they knew that what they were doing mattered. And to me, those are things that I hold on to in difficult moments, which there seems like many of at this moment in time. Those are mine.
Well, we are all beneficiaries of your focus on your important work. And I'll tell you what gives me hope is this incredible community of governors that you've brought together who love to learn and respect the truth. That gives me hope. And the fact that our favorite golden retriever is in this position gives me a lot of hope. Sharon, you are a national treasure. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you. As they say in Minnesota, when you see something cute in Minnesota, what would you say here in Pennsylvania if you see something cute?
Aw.
You'd say, aw.
Aw.
Aw. In Minnesota, we would say, oh, for cute. all for cute. And my mom is from Southern California, and so when she married a man that she had met one time and moved to northern Minnesota, and his entire family said things like, all for cute. She was like, what does that even mean? Oh, for cute? But it's fur like F-E-R. That's how you have to spell that. For all for cute, all.
I won't be using that, but thank you.
Aw.
Sharon, thank you again. Those of you who want books signed, I think Eden is going to point you in the right direction, and Sharon will be with you in a few minutes. Thank you all again.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.